Pick up the chef's knife in your kitchen right now and flip the handle over. Is the word Yangjiang stamped on it? If yes, you are holding a piece of one of the most underrated industrial stories of our time. Because that small city in southern China you've probably never heard of has quietly cracked open something that took the Germans nearly 300 years to build. A few months back, I was driving from Guangdong to Guangxi with my family, and our route took us through Yangjiang. We pulled into a highway rest stop, and what I saw made me stop in my tracks. The rest stop wasn't selling snacks or souvenirs. It was selling knives, an entire wall of them. Gleaming chef's knives, cleavers, scissors. More impressive than anything you'd see in a department store. Reuters recently reported that Chinese consumer goods exports are hitting Western markets harder than ever. The report named several categories driving this wave, and knives and stainless steel cutlery were near the top of the list. And a huge chunk of those products come from one place: Yangjiang. Yangjiang is officially called the knifed and scissors capital of China, and the title isn't a marketing slogan. Public data shows Yangjiang produces around 70 to 75% of all knives and scissors made in China, and accounts for roughly 85% of national exports. The city is home to more than 8,500 enterprises tied to this single industry. Think about that. 3 out of every 4 knives sold in China are made here. For the longest time, the Swiss and Germans probably didn't pay much attention to Yangjiang. Swiss Victorinox has been making Swiss Army knives for over 100 years. German Zwilling has been around since 1731, almost 3 centuries. To Europeans, these brands defined the ceiling of what a knife could be. A classic Victorinox Swiss Army knife retails around $50 to $60. A forged Zwilling chef's knife can run you $200 or more. So what was Yangjiang doing all this time? Mostly one thing: making knives for other people's brands. Factories there churned out blades for international labels, slapped on someone else's logo, and earned a small processing fee. A knife might leave the factory for $3 and end up on a Western shelf for $30. Branded as German engineering. A friend in the export business once told me something I never forgot. He said, the worst feeling for Yangjiang factory owners is watching their own knives. Identical product, identical quality, sell for 10 times what they made on it, just because the label says something else. That's the curse of being a contract manufacturer. You have the capacity, the skill, the workforce, but you don't have the brand. You don't control the price. The next time you spend $100 on a made-in-Germany kitchen knife at a high-end store, flip it over and squint at the fine print. Here is a real chance it came from a workshop in Yangjiang. Zwilling is a living example of this. The German company operates production sites in several countries, including China. They run 2 brand lines. Premium Zwilling label with the Twin Figures logo includes forged knives genuinely made in Solingen, Germany. But the mid-tier Henkels line with the single figure logo, much of it is produced in China. Even Zwilling itself relies on Chinese capacity. How strong is the supply chain in this region? From stainless steel coils, all the way to forging, stamping, edging, polishing, handle assembly, and packaging, every single step can be sourced within a few dozen kilometers. From order placement to shipment, the fastest turnaround is 2 weeks. Place the same order in Solingen, Germany, and you are looking at 3 months minimum. This kind of industrial cluster efficiency simply doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Quick side note: the edge grinding masters in Yangjiang are highly respected craftsmen locally. How good a knife feels in your hand depends 70% on the steel and 30% on the edge angle. A skilled grinder can earn the equivalent of a comfortable middle-class income in this small city. Most factories now use automated grinding equipment, but the top-tier product lines still rely on master craftsmen. Machines can't replicate the feel. Swiss Victorinox took a completely different path. They still produce every single Swiss Army knife in Switzerland, in a small town called Ibach. The factory hasn't moved in centuries. Their entire strategy rests on brand premium and the gold standard label of Swiss made. But Victorinox is facing a harsh reality. Global inflation has shrunk European consumers' wallets. A $50 pocket knife is no longer a casual purchase for many shoppers. Open Amazon or Temu today, and you'll find dozens of multifunction folding knives from Chinese makers with comparable functionality at 1/5 or even 1/10 the price. Here is the most interesting shift. European and American consumers used to buy knives at supermarkets or specialty stores, where the shelves were stocked with Zwilling, Victorinox, WMF, and a few other heritage brands. Now they open their phones, and the algorithm pushes them an endless stream of unfamiliar Chinese brands with shockingly low prices and surprisingly solid reviews. The Financial Times used a phrase to describe this: price tsunami. Chinese consumer goods flooding into Western markets through cross-border e-commerce, undercutting local brands across categories from power tools to kitchenware, and putting enormous pressure on European small and mid-size manufacturers. Yangjiang knives are one wave in that tsunami. You might assume Yangjiang appeared out of nowhere. It didn't. Knife making in Yangjiang goes back over 1,000 years. T here is a local saying that people here are born of the blade, raised by the blade. But the real transformation, from a regional knife-making town to the global capital of cutlery, only happened over the past 2 or 3 decades. Back in the 1990s, most Yangjiang knife factories were family workshops. A family would set up a few forges, hand hammer blades, and sell them at nearby markets. Quality was inconsistent. Some knives were dull within 2 days. If anyone told you back then that Yangjiang could compete with Zwilling, nobody would have believed it. The biggest bottleneck at the time was steel. Good steel had to be imported. Japanese AUS -10, German 1.4116. Expensive, and suppliers weren't always willing to sell. Quality consistency depended on luck. Without good steel, no amount of grinding can save a blade. Change came one step at a time. A handful of factory owners realized hand forging alone had no future. They started importing automated edge grinding equipment from Japan and Germany. They started studying steel alloy formulations. This kind of upgrade can't be rushed. It has to be tackled link by link. Tut, here is a veteran Yangjiang company called Shibazi, well known locally. They did something competitors thought was foolish at the time. They built their own steel production line. Everyone else bought finished steel coils for processing. Shibazi went all the way back to the source, mixing their own alloys, smelting their own steel, doing their own forging. The investment was huge, and they lost money for years. But the bet paid off. They took control of both quality and cost at the source, no longer held hostage by upstream steel suppliers. Today, Shibazi is sometimes called China's #1 knife brand, with exports to dozens of countries. That store I saw at the highway rest stop? That was Shibazi. The place was packed. Around the same time, Zhang Xiaoquan was also transforming. This Hangzhou heritage brand has nearly 400 years of history, but had been struggling for a while. They eventually went international through Amazon and Lazada. And they discovered something fascinating. Chinese cleavers have square heads. Western chefs' knives have pointed tips. Different cuisines, different blade shapes. Zhang Xiaoquan developed an entirely new Western-style chef's knife line. They redesigned the blade profile, the color palette, the packaging. They even changed the handle materials and colors, going with gold and oak white as their signature look. Think about that. A brand that perfected the Chinese cleaver over 4 centuries completely redesigned their core product just to sell abroad. A German Handelsblatt analysis once observed that Chinese consumer goods makers are learning a critical lesson. Instead of dumping domestic products overseas, they're redesigning around local habits. This is a completely different export logic from 10 years ago, when the formula was sell whatever's cheapest. Cross-border e-commerce has had a massive impact on industrial clusters like Yangjiang. In the old days, factories had to export through trading companies, with margins eaten away at every layer. Now, through platforms like Temu, Alibaba International, and Amazon, factories can sell directly to overseas consumers. Fewer middlemen, fatter margins. Here is a stat to chew on. Yangjiang's knife and scissors exports have crossed 4 billion yuan. A single mid-sized city's exports of cutlery alone now exceeds the GDP of some small nations. Local government is also pushing a clever idea, a collective trademark. Instead of individual companies trying to make it abroad, they're branding Yangjiang hardware cutlery as one collective identity. Small factories can't afford big branding campaigns alone. Banding together creates real volume. A Bloomberg analyst observed something important. Chinese consumer goods exports are undergoing a structural shift, moving from bulk, low-cost commodities to mid-tier premium products. Knives and kitchenware are textbook examples. Quality now approaches European brand levels, but prices remain at roughly one-third. That assessment is accurate. The knives Yangjiang exports today aren't the cheap blades that dulled after 2 days of use. Many factories now hold German TÜV certification and EU CE certification, qualifying them for mainstream Western retail channels. But let's also pour some cold water on the optimism. Yangjiang's biggest weakness is still branding. Out of 8,500 companies, the number with genuine independent brands and international recognition can be counted on a few hands. Most factories still rely on contract manufacturing or wage price wars on TEMU. Price wars eventually compress margins back down to nothing. The other challenge is the trust barrier in the high-end segment. When someone pays $200 for a forged Zwilling, they're not just buying a knife. They're buying the story, made in Germany, forged in Solingen. Building equivalent brand trust takes more than a few years. The Reuters report also mentioned that European industry associations are already calling for tariffs on Chinese consumer goods, citing unfair competition. These trade barriers could create new pressure on Yangjiang exporters. But the direction is right. Yangjiang's total cutlery industry chain now exceeds 55 billion yuan in scale. Don't underestimate that figure. That's one city focused on one product category. Behind those numbers are hundreds of thousands of jobs and the livelihoods of countless families. A Yangjiang factory owner said something in an interview recently that stuck with me. He said, "I am not afraid to compete on quality with anyone. I am only afraid of not being given the chance to put my own label on the blade." Now the chance has come. Cross-border e-commerce has opened the channel. Yangjiang factories can face global consumers directly, without slapping someone else's name on their work. Whether this window stays open depends on what these factory owners and the young entrepreneurs returning home do next. Next time you pick up a chef's knife in your kitchen, flip it over. Those two characters might be hiding right there.